Seven, well, this is a very rough translation, a very direct translation, but Our Lady of the Seven Pains. No, not kidding. I know it's more to do with virtue and Our Lady of the Seven, not punishments, but, you know, trials, but nonetheless, here we are, and that's what it's called, and I'm in front of it. So here we go. Yes. So for those of you tuning in, I had finally somebody reached out and said, "Hey, I know I kind of did a brief overview of what you can do with photos, in terms of a photo book or something, really quick." And I mean, this was Lance overview, but um, what I wanted to kind of, what I wanted to kind of touch on tonight was I have a course that I'm building right now that will go online on mastermind.com, and it will be a full how to do your photo book from A to Z. I'm really excited about it. I'm actually having a lot of fun building it, and I will be beta testing it. I will have a beta test running very soon just to make sure that everything is clear and clean and how it should be. But um, there are a few tips that I will be giving here that also go in that course. And one of the tips is any of these projects, you need to organize your photos. But there's some fun things that helps to know. Um, First things first. One thing that helps to know is um, you can make albums, or I hope you know you can make albums. Now, as I mentioned before in the iCloud one, putting a photo in an album doesn't necessarily move it from one box to another. So don't delete them off your camera roll when you move them to an album. But moving them to an album allows you to get to them much more easily. So this is really, really a great way to kind of group your photos together. And one of the big advantages to an album is once they are in an album, you can reorder them the way you want. Now, this leads me to the second tip that I got to give because this is really important. The photos you pick, of course, must be important to you, and they must have significance because you're not going to be as eager to share them if they don't have the significance you want. However, what I will mention is, despite their significance, there's a catch to the context. You see, you have a certain context for the photos you've taken. You know them to be of a certain time period, or you know them to go in a certain chronological order. There's a catch. When you're showing this to somebody else, it helps to remember that they don't have the context you do. They don't see things the same way you do. They don't have that back memory or the memory of where or when these things were taken. So it's important to kind of remember your photos in terms of primary, in terms of these are the ones that absolutely must be in there because they establish the scene, they set the mood, they indicate what the theme of that page, of what that segment is. These are the critical key photos. Everything hinges. These are the linchpin photos that if they didn't exist in this particular context, they, the presentation would lack context. So that's super important. The other thing is any supporting photos, and you can have supporting photos, is they don't need to be from the same set. They could be from others, but they do have to have some visual effect and they have to contribute to the story, which leads to tip number three, tell a story. So you will have what you put out, you're making a way, you're putting your photos together in a way to tell a story. So how are you telling this story? Now, the biggest trick to this one is to remember that perfection is achieved not when you can add anything more, but when you can take nothing else away. Pages should have odd numbers of elements. This is a visual thing. Even numbers of elements tend to divide the attention, whereas odd numbers of elements tend to favor one and support it. So you could have, now there are exceptions to every rule. This is true. But A page with 5 photos, for example, tends to work better than a page with 2 photos, unless those 2 photos are somehow like when you open a book, if you have a page, if you have a spread between over the 2 pages and 1 photo per page, it works out. It looks nice. It can look very nice. If it's 1 photo spread out, it tends to be a little more impressive. If you have 1 page divided into 2 photos, it doesn't tend to have that same visual oomph as if you have a negative space by having 3 images, maybe even at different sizes. So these are things to consider when you're putting your photos together. Remember that you know the context, your viewer doesn't. So it almost helps to kind of step back and separate yourself from the photos for just a minute and look at them purely from a visual view, from visual context. So that's the third tip. Um, Beyond that, well, actually, that's tip number 4 kind of rolled in because your odd number of elements. Um, the last thing I'm going to say is make sure that your images support each other visually. If you have 2 outdoor images with large blue skies and then a red table setting, that's going to contrast. It'll be quite the juxtaposition. If you again, all rules are made to be broken. If you do this intentionally, that's fine. Know why you're doing it. You might even offset that by having a beautiful outdoor shot showing where the scene is taking place and your red table setting underneath with a visual caption next to it, or with a caption next to it that really explains that scene. And that can really kind of bring that out. But the attention is very much going to go to the visual density, which is most likely in the red tablecloth or the red set table. So there are tricks to all of this, and I will be going over those in the course, but I wanted to give you a few tips to kind of start you off. Um, put your photos together in an album. Albums let you reorder photos. So put the photos in an order that kind of makes sense visually, that you can kind of look and it tells a story for you. That really will bring something out for you. Beyond that, then it's a matter of, okay, now that we know what we're putting in, then it's a matter of getting in and putting them together and arranging and try to picture your layout. Remember back to a couple of episodes ago where I talked about kind of having a plan. If you have a general idea, that's great. Go for it. Sketch it out. If you don't, that's okay too. Some of these photo books, when you have the photos, allow you to play and you can kind of get some really neat kind of we won't call them Bob Ross, happy little accidents. You know, there are no mistakes, there are only happy little accidents. So that actually applies here. You can really get creative with this stuff, and adding 6 photos to a page and adding a 7th element, for example, could be a great way to keep the odd number of elements and still have that impact. And there are ways to do that that can be extraordinarily effective. I'm going to leave you with that tonight. I hope you guys have a great evening. Come on back tomorrow. I'm going to dive into photos one more time and kind of give a few other pointers and whatnot. And maybe I can do this kind of a visual demonstration. But I will see you guys tomorrow. It's live at 6:45, and this is not technically perfect with me, Richard Struther, and can't wait to see you guys tomorrow. Thanks so much. Have a great evening.